All right, go.
Well, good morning, everyone, and Merry Christmas to all. Today, we're going to explore how Christmas is celebrated in other countries and in other lands. It's one of the, as we know, very important Christian feast days. And even though it's only mentioned in two of the Gospels, it has been a very exciting holiday from early times. Only the Gospels of Matthew and Luke mention it, and those have additional details that don't often appear in the other one. We hear about the Nativity Star, and going on right now is a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. In fact, last night they were very close and very bright. So you might want to take a little time, go outside and look. The star is actually both of those planets kind of aligning up in the sky. We don't know exactly when Jesus was born. Scholars in 2008 came up with the day of June 17th. How peculiar. But and we do know that he was probably born between 7 and 2 BC, and that has to do with the way the calendar was calculated back in early times. We don't know how many wise men appear. By tradition, we talk about 3 wise men. And it appears, according to the gospel account, when we look at the Greek, that they actually visited him at his home, probably after he had gone back to Nazareth rather than there in Bethlehem. We have a photo coming up here of Magi priests. We talk about wise men and 3 kings, but Magi priests, we still have Magi priests today. Let's see if we can get a look at them. They should be right next. There we go. Magi priests are in the religion of Zoroastrianism, which was founded about 800 BC by Zoroaster. It's a dualistic religion, and it has the idea of a great God, and they're often referred to as fire worshipers or worshipers of the light. So it's very appropriate in a way that these religious priests or figures were seeking the light and actually came toward Bethlehem where Jesus was born. Very interesting religion. It's a very remnant religion in Persia now. Very few people are adherents. Oddly, Freddie Mercury of the rock group Queen was a Zoroastrian. But it's not very spread, and it's very contracted from what it originally was. But it was the religion of Persia. Okay, as time passed, of course, let's talk about real briefly gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, of course, was a symbol of wealth, honoring kings and royalty. Frankincense, of course, incense is burned at all prayer times in ancient cultures and even in ours, and represents the prayers of the people going up to the heavens, to God. And it's a way to honor God and to show honor when frankincense is burned. And myrrh, that's one of the herbs used in burial and in death. So a premonition there of Christ being ultimately ending up in the tomb. So we have a photo. The next one is of Constantine the Great, the emperor who presided over the council at Nicaea, whose mother was a Christian. He was, of course, a military man, the great emperor, around 320 AD there. And he made Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. So he was very, very important, very seminal in having Christianity spread throughout the Roman world. He actually, we've got a little clip, a little photo of Bethlehem, the city of Bethlehem. And his mother, Helena, traveled to the Holy Land to try to determine where some of these events were that are mentioned in the Gospels, where Jesus was born, where he was crucified, and where he was buried. And churches were built. Constantine had churches built on those locations to commemorate the significant events in Jesus' life. Up until then, Christianity had not been a pilgrimage religion. It had been a very interior directed religion, but people always were very curious on where these events happened. So by the time Helena arrived in 300, 320 AD, these sites were well known and people had been visiting them for hundreds of years, several hundred years. All right, we have a little video of Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity, which has been a pilgrimage site since very early times. Okay, it's still muted, I think, here. See if we can.
Mary and Joseph were compelled to return to Bethlehem to be counted in a Roman census. It wasn't the best timing. They were forced to make the week-long walk from Nazareth to Bethlehem right when Mary was near the end of her pregnancy. Time to load up and drive to present-day Bethlehem myself, where my first stop will be the Church of the Nativity. This is the oldest standing church in continual use in the Holy Land. It's 1,449 years old. It's amazing to me. This is the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. And as old as it is, it's the second such Christian church built on this same site. The first building, built by Roman Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena in the 4th century, was burned and destroyed when the Samaritans rose up against the Byzantine Empire in the mid-500s. But shortly thereafter, Roman Emperor Justinian began rebuilding this, the current structure, in 556 AD. Modified over the years, it is said to have retained the architectural tone of the original church building as built by Constantine himself. But look, a piece of the old church survived. You can still see this large remnants of the floor from Constantine's original construction. This dates back to 339 AD, which makes it 1,675 years young, as Granddad would say. Now, this surviving piece of the original floor was rediscovered in 1934 while they were doing some repair work. Its craftsmanship is amazing. According to very early tradition, Mary gave birth to Jesus in a cave just beneath this altar. Now, this cave, or grotto, as it's known here in the church, is marked by a 14-point silver star. Now, as the genealogy of Jesus is described in the Gospel of Matthew, the 14 points of this star represent the 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people, and 14 from the exile to the birth of Jesus. Now, the tradition that Jesus was born here dates back to the 1st century, having been a pilgrimage site for many early Christians. In fact, Christian apologist Justin Martyr, who lived from 100 to 165 AD, along with other church fathers, identifies this as the site for Jesus' birth. This is
All right, very good. A quick visit to Bethlehem. Hopefully all of us could get there someday and actually arrive at that magnificent spot. Interesting, Justinian, who built Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, was the ruler, the Christian ruler who rebuilt that. So kind of interesting, a lot of activity building in those days. We're going to turn to a country that was never part of the Roman Empire, Armenia, north and east of Turkey. And it's very ancient. In fact, it claims to be the first country that became officially Christian in about 300 AD. They also claim to have the oldest cathedral. Now, most of what we're seeing, virtually all of this, is their main cathedral in Vegharsapat, their capital. And it has largely been added onto, but there are actual remnants that have been dated back to around 300, 320 AD. So Christianity arrived in this part of the world, evolved rather uniquely. They have a little bit of tradition that's different from ours, which of course ours evolved within the Roman Empire. And since Armenia, they were part of the Soviet Union until very recently, but they've become independent. So they're able to celebrate on their own as well. But they actually celebrate New Year's as the day when Father Christmas comes, and then fast for about a week. And they celebrate dual theophany, a double appearance of Christ on January 6th, which is their nativity celebration, and also the celebration, same day, of the baptism of Jesus by John in the Jordan. So they have both of those events occurring on the same day, which is also called Water Blessing Day. Now, I think we have a photo of some Armenian food here next. And, for Christmas Eve, they have a lot of, they break their fast with trout and chickpea dishes and soups, and they even have a braided bread. I don't know if I see that here. It looks like a dolmade equivalent with grape leaves wrapped around rice and meat. Very delicious. They have some desserts that they celebrate Christmas with. It's basically walnuts wrapped in grape jelly with a crust over the top of those. It sounds actually pretty delicious. On Christmas Day itself, they move on from the fish dishes into lamb and pork and even glazed ham. So they really have a big celebration. It's a lot of food, mostly a time of thoughtfulness, not a lot of, like I say, gift giving. That's occurred on New Year's, on the 31st of December. So Christmas is a time of food and celebration together. I think we have a photo of the Armenian version of Nativity, and it's kind of interesting. There's Mary, kind of central, a little bit to the left, giving birth. But at the bottom, we have this image of a baptism going on. And it doesn't appear to be Jesus by John, but it is a baptism. And it does reveal their belief that both the baptism and the nativity are very closely entwined. Okay, I think the next country, let's look at Ethiopia. They're down in Africa, the Horn of Africa, which is on the east side, below Egypt. And Ethiopia is mentioned in the Bible many times. Queen of Sheba was evidently from down in that area. And let's see if we've got, we're going to have a video of an Ethiopian church service. But before we arrive there, in that video, I'd like to mention a couple things. That in Ethiopia, when they worship, women and men are segregated. Generally, their churches are fairly round in shape. The clergy, you'll see them in the center. They have some resting sticks. You're going to see these almost like canes, and those are resting sticks because their services are very long. And in particular, the Christmas service starts at 6 in the evening and lasts until 3 in the morning. So it's a very long, very strenuous service. A lot of excitement, though. They begin it by walking around the church 3 times. And in the video here, on the exterior. I think you'll see that at the end of the video. But they're very Trinitarian, and again, never part of the Roman Empire, so their Christian traditions evolved a little separately. Can we spin up that video? There we go.
The deadliest month in American history was
Okay, a very joyful time. You can see a little uniqueness there in their celebration, but a lot of similarity too. You notice the incense, which is very much a feature of this high holiday, high holy day in the Eastern Church as well as in the Western. Such joyfulness and excitement. They have a really strenuous fasting schedule. They fast for 43 days before Christmas. And actually in Ethiopia, the Christians there have about 250 fast days a year. So they have a pretty rigorous form of denial and periods of penitence and contemplation. This is a view of the Nativity. It's adorable. Look at, we've got all the little baby animals there as well as with baby Jesus. And we've got, of course, the shepherds and the angels and the wise men, and Jesus looking very happy to be coming into the world. So let's take a look at some Ethiopian food just real quick here. There's a good meal setting. I had some Ethiopian food in New York City a year ago, and boy, it was good. And I suspect it must have been the wat, which is almost like a stew, and oh, very delicious. And of course, after the fasting period, they have meat. They're very rigorous. No dairy, no eggs, no meat, no nothing during the periods of their fast. But when they break the fast, wow, they really go have wonderful feasts. And this wat, which is a stew, they have some very thin bread. And Dean Churchwell had mentioned that she actually had some of that as well. And you take the bread and you kind of move it through the wat and use it almost as a device to eat with. It's really exciting, really a delicious food, wonderful time. Great way to celebrate the holiday that they have. All right, I think now well, and I should mention that they really are not real big on exchanging gifts. They generally are not, it's not a big feature of Christmas there in Ethiopia. Going to turn to Greece now, and we're still in the Eastern Orthodox tradition of Christianity, the Eastern Church. And of course, it's very ancient. Paul was writing his epistles to the Greeks. So it's a very, very early Christian foundational church as well. There's some issues there on holidays and how times are moved around, but because of Gregorian and Julian calendars. But generally, Christmas is celebrated on the 25th of December, which was initiated by Constantine. And December was a huge festival month for the ancient Romans. And one of the reasons that early Christians moved, and Constantine moved Christmas from January 6th to December 25th, is the Romans would celebrate something called the Feast of the Saturnalia. And it was for the planet Saturn, the god Saturn. And it was a big time of eating and feasting. And also the shortest day of the year, when people would actually be coaxing the sun to start coming back. Here we see a decorated boat, and that's been a feature in Greece since they are very seafaring with all the islands. And that's been a way to celebrate. They've actually brought Christmas trees in starting in the 1830s or so with one of their kings, but they still, large boats and miniature boats decorated are very much a feature of Christmas. And it also commemorates the apostles who were fishers of men. On Christmas Eve, children in Greece sing carols called Kalanta, and they go along the streets and they'll have drums and triangles. And if they sing really well, hopefully they're given some sweet nut and fig treats, and sometimes even a little bit of money as a gift. For Christmas at night, they have a midnight liturgy. And I've found a clip of an Eastern Orthodox liturgy, and actually it's occurring in Moscow, but their liturgies are very similar and they engage all the senses. You will see that they are all the senses: sight, sound, smell, communion for taste, and touch are all part of their holy liturgy. And in this particular clip, there are a number of patriarchs, but it represents the kind of excited celebration that they have, and quite a spectacle as well. So let's take a look at this Easter liturgy.
Yeah.
You'll notice the large communion vessel there. In the Orthodox Church, the bread is mixed with the wine generally, and a little extra sound there. All right. Generally, the bread is mixed in with the wine, and at communion, you receive a spoon. You go up, you recite your Christian name to the priest, and you're given a spoon of the communion, which is a mixture of bread and wine. Let's see, we're looking at some Greek food, and a lot of us, we do have good access to Greek food here, but some of the desserts, like this one, rolled in nuts and with a special sweet bread with honey. Oh my goodness, I think they call this the Melo Macaroma cookie, and there's orange glazing with cinnamon and cloves and walnuts and honey in those cookies. Let's see what else we've got here. Oh yeah, there's just kind of a large variety. There's lamb, and it looks like even some pork on the upper right there. They have a special bread. You can see, look at the bread up on the upper left with nuts and glazes of sugar on it. And then the almond cookies dusted with sugar down below. They really do celebrate with a lot of wonderful food. They have, of course, a feast time, but they break their feast after midnight there. Oh, there's some little, we call them pigs in the blanket, but they call them baby Jesus in the swaddling clothes. And they're actually just little rolls in cabbage there with meat and spices inside, a little bit of rice, very delicious, but little baby Jesus rolls there. So they use their food to help commemorate much of the events in the Christmas season there. They do exchange gifts. Generally, that occurs at the beginning of Christmas Eve, but it's kind of optional. You'll find, even in the United States here, we have a little bit of variety on whether we give gifts on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And some families I know actually waited until the Epiphany, until Wise Men Day, January 6th. Let me see, is there anything else we want to really talk about there? There is a tradition in Greece of purifying the house with holy water. And they'll do that each day of Christmas, on the 12 days of Christmas, where the wife will go around and sprinkle holy water. And the thought is to keep away evil spirits. They have an old tradition that from under the earth, evil spirits come up and wander around during the 12 days of Christmas. So by sprinkling holy water on your house, you prevent those spirits from coming in, and also assure a good beginning of the year. Let's turn our attention now to Germany. We're getting into the Western Church here, and Germany's got many different traditions. And in Germany, with the rise of Protestantism, Christmas was often not celebrated. It was looked at as a pagan holiday that had been incorporated into the church. So there are some Protestant branches that do not celebrate Christmas. Quakers, Church of Christ, Jehovah's Witness, and many Pentecostal groups. And even in the United States, we did not really celebrate Christmas much up until the 1870s or 1880s. It was not really highly emphasized. Congress actually would meet all through the Christmas holidays, right up until after the Civil War there. But Germany it's got Lutheran traditions as well as Roman Catholic and other traditions that all mix together. And here's a picture of how they decorate their towns. They really go all out. And they have, I think there's another photo. There's a Christmas market, and they've got merry-go-rounds and of course Christmas trees and lots of things for sale, kind of like we do here with we're starting to have little Christmas huts downtown there in Midtown, where you can go shopping and find good gifts and things like that. So you recognize that a lot of the traditions in Germany with Sinterklaas, are similar traditions that we have here in the U.S. We've largely adopted a lot of their traditions. They do have some odd things, though, that we don't have here in the U.S. They have, of course, Saint Nick is going around delivering gifts and being just kind of the Saint Nicholas that we really love, or the Santa Claus. But they have a dark side to Christmas, and he's called Krampus, or Dark Peter, or Black Peter. And he's kind of the alter ego of the wonderful, kind Saint Nicholas, and he's designed to kind of scare children into being good and remind them that, hey, if they're naughty, they're going to end up hanging out with Krampus, and he'll give them lumps of coal and things like that. He's kind of a goat-like figure. There's one more picture of him, I believe, but he's kind of a goat-like creature with a tail, and just he's also known for going around and whipping children. One feature, if you're naughty, you get whipped. Look at that. He's grabbed up some naughty children and put him in his basket there to carry them off. So those Germans, they've always got a little bit of a dark side to even the bright side at times, it seems. But and I can say that because that's part of my heritage. But we did not celebrate Krampus. Really kind of a scary guy. Christmas Eve is really the main time for the exchange of presents in Germany. They have, starting in the 1800s, a wonderful little tradition that's popped up called the Christ Child. And it's actually a child or young adult, generally a young woman, who will have some ceremonial activities that are required of her during the holiday. And she's thought to bring gifts as well, especially on Epiphany, which is a day that used to be for girls, just girls' presents. Nicholas would bring presents to the boys on Christmas Eve, and then the girls would get their presents on the 6th of January. So anyway, this is just a little snapshot of one of their current Christ Child gift bearers. They also celebrate, and this is very prominent in Scandinavia, San Lucia, the feast of San Lucia, which is Saint Lucy. And she's the patron saint from Sicily, who was martyred in 300 AD or 250 AD. And she's a patron saint of light and of eyesight. So if you're going to your eye doctor, you could say a prayer to San Lucia that your surgery or whatever's going on with your eyes will be improved. And they wear this interesting kind of Advent wreath on their head. But again, it's to celebrate light coming into the world and the purity of light, which is associated especially with virginity and young women. Okay, let's see what we have now. Here's some food from Germany. They're real big on goose there. It's a big feature, along with some of the other traditional schnitzels and veal cutlets and things. And look at the chestnut dressing up in the upper left there. All different kinds of shortbread cookies and cookies made with different kinds of nuts. Pretzels that have all kinds of decorations and special shapes to them, custards, breads in all different forms. So they really have a delightful breaking of their fast. Again, after the Christmas Eve service is when all the great feasting begins in Germany there. Okay, let's turn ourselves next to France. We just love France. I was able to live in France for about a year when I was young. And France is very big on nativity scenes and cradles. We're going to have a video of Notre Dame. They ring the church bells in France on Christmas Day. When I was in Paris, all the churches ring their bells nonstop, although they do have to stop to let the bells cool down because they generate a lot of heat when you ring them constantly. But just enormous pealing of bells throughout Paris. And Notre Dame, unfortunately, Notre Dame, we know that it's had a fire and has been damaged. But this was a fairly recent clip of ringing the bells at Notre Dame in Paris on Christmas Day. We're lucky to have YouTube. All of these videos are on YouTube, and you can go ahead and get extended clips of them and get some really interesting shots of other Christmas activities. In France, they have a tradition of burning a Yule log in the fireplace of cherry wood, and they would put soak it in red wine and spices to give off an extra good scent. And it was thought, again, to ward off any kinds of evil spirits lurking in the dark days of winter here. And the tradition was burning the Yule log throughout the night, and then you would leave out food. You'd leave some candles lit, and you'd leave out some food and drinks in case Jesus and Mary came for a visit during the night. I suppose a glass of milk for baby Jesus, but in any case, that was one of the traditions. Father Christmas would appear and leave gifts. At times, in some families, in other families, Father Christmas would appear on the Feast of the Kings on January 6th, when the wise men were thought to have appeared. At least that was the French version. There's a big main meal called the Réveillon, which is the waking up, because you've been fasting all this time. So you have a big meal after midnight mass and on Christmas Day. And that's the big wake up meal with all kinds of food. We had sanglier, which was wild boar when I was there, which it was delicious. It had been soaked in wine and all kinds of special pastries and other dishes, as you can imagine. One of the main features is the Yule is the Yule dessert, and it's looking like a kind of like a Yule log. And this is a photo of their special cake that they have. It's called Bûche de Noël, and it's one of their prime features of Christmas food and desserts. Okay, let's look. I think we're headed to Mexico. And there's just a picture, it's kind of a fuzzy one, but of the main square in Mexico City, the Zócalo. They do decorate and celebrate Christmas there downtown, kind of on the main square, and have lights and things at night as well. Mexico had kind of a history of anti-clericalism back in the early 1900s, but now overt displays are allowed and encouraged, and everybody has a good time. Traditions in Mexico are very much like Southern European traditions, France and Spain, as you can imagine, and Italy. They have one really special tradition that evolved pretty much there, from what I can tell, called Las Posadas. Posadas are inns, and it's where families reenact Mary and Joseph going from place to place, trying to find refuge. And you can imagine, Mary has traveled 80 miles, probably 8 or 10 days on a mule or a donkey, bouncing around, fully pregnant and ready to give birth. And here, this reenacts them trying to find a place where Christ can be born. It's called Las Posadas. don't think I hear any sound with this yet.
Groups reenacting the biblical story of Mary and Joseph's journey in search of shelter in Bethlehem.
They were looking for a place to stay, but there was a big influx of immigrants and nobody could receive them.
During these nightly posadas leading up to Christmas, the Melendez family visits a series of homes asking for shelter. People inside sing back, saying they don't have room.
The melody is really beautiful, but if you listen to the lyrics, they're harsh. I'm telling them that they don't have a place for them to stay and to go away, to let them sleep, and if they don't leave, they're even gonna beat them.
The last house the group arrives at finally welcomes them in. After a prayer, a party begins.
Finally, people receive them in their hearts, and that's why there's a big celebration that includes the piñata.
One of the most recognizable symbols in a posada is the piñata. The traditional posada piñata features 7 points representing the 7 deadly sins.
The bright colors are supposed to represent temptation, because the piñata itself is supposed to represent evil. So the colors are used to hide the evil.
Olga's Piñatas, who sells dozens during this time of year, says participants are usually blindfolded.
Well, the blindfold is supposed to represent your faith.
The stick represents virtue.
Like you want to overcome the evil, so by hitting it, you're breaking the evil and destroying it.
Oh, it's so beautiful to know that we're passing on the tradition to the children.
Yes. Venite peregrinos. Come, pilgrims. Come and enter. There's a cake that they have that's like the Three Kings cake. And this is eaten on January 6th. And generally there's a crown in it, or a baby Jesus, but generally a small crown. And if you win the crown, if you actually get it, then you get to throw a tamale party at Candlemas, which is in February, I believe, February 2nd. It's kind of like the Mardi Gras cakes that we have as well. And, cakes are a big feature of Christmas. Fruitcake equivalents in Germany and elsewhere are very, very popular, as we even have that feature here. I think let's go ahead and turn our attention lastly here. The last stop is Italy. And we're pretty familiar with aspects of Italy. There's a lot of variety there in Italy because of different regional activities. December 8th really kind of spins things up because that's the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And that's when the nativity scene is traditionally set up. And no baby Jesus, as in Mexico and elsewhere, there's no baby Jesus in the nativity scene until the 25th of December. December 13th is the Santa Lucia. Remember the young ladies with the candles, candle crowns. That's another big festival in Italy. Christmas Eve is when the feast begins. Generally on Christmas Eve, you exclude meat. You can go ahead and have some other dishes. Go off to midnight mass and then come back and enjoy, let the feasting begin. And they even celebrate St. Stephen's Day on December 26th. That St. Stephen was the first Christian martyr mentioned in Acts. And that's another big feast day. Now, what we're looking at here is a photo of La Befana. And this was the legendary woman who was not included with the Magi when they were going to go see Jesus. She had some sweeping to do and some other activities, and she didn't get to accompany them, even though they invited her. But when she discovered or learned that the Son of God had been born, that Jesus had been born, she was very regretful. And so she comes back even now and brings gifts to children to try to amend for the time that she missed not getting to go see baby Jesus. So she's quite the Santa Claus equivalent in some parts of Italy. Then, of course, here's a Feast of the Seven Fishes, very popular in southern Italy and then coastal areas. And actually it's 7 different seafoods that are prepared, and one of their most exciting dishes. Patrono here in Oklahoma City has a 7 fishes celebration every Christmas holiday. I've been to 2 of them and they're wonderful, really good. Okay, they have a bread called Pinatone, which is actually means kind of like big sweet bread. And this goes back to ancient Roman times, centered around Milan, and it's got candied fruit and nuts in it, very much a fruit cake like we have, but very much an important part of their celebration. Sometimes it's called Christ cake because it's got all kinds of ingredients in it, just as Christ came into the world for everyone and uniting everyone. Okay, we have, I believe, a kind of closing here with a video of Assisi, where St. Francis up in the 1200s came up with the reenactment of the Nativity that we continue to have with all of our nativity creches and nativity scenes. And this is where it began, with St. Francis in Assisi.
Charismatic man named Francis from the town of Assisi helped popularize the nativity scene. This story began in the winter of 1223, when St. Francis was traveling from Rome to Assisi. His biographers write that he used a straw-filled manger and real animals.
Lui vedeva in Greccio Bethlehem.
He saw in Greccio Bethlehem, and he wanted that at every Christmas, even to today, the cities, the countries recreate the nativity scene. He wanted the town, the city that celebrates Christmas, to become like Bethlehem and to become like Greccio. So we're the characters of the nativity scene, more than the statues made of terracotta or of wood or some other material.
Di legno o di altro materiale.
In the upper basilica of St. Francis, where the painter, who is traditionally identified as Giotto, shows us the moment when Francis himself put the image of the Christ child in a manger.
The Nativity also inspired some of the greatest artists of the Renaissance, including Giotto, Fra Angelico, Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, Filippino Lippi, and Caravaggio. They're responsible for some of the most famous works depicting the Nativity of Jesus. A charismatic...
Well, that concludes our presentation on Christmas and some of these other places. As you can see, a period of fasting and penitence and reflection can burst out just as Christ bursts into the world with joy and engagement with one another and love. May the blessings of Christmas be with us all this year. And thank you for this opportunity to spend a little time and talk about the wonder of Christ coming into the world.